Hello. So when aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, we find equilibrium level of income and employment. Well, equilibrium level may be at full employment or may not be. So sometimes what happens, it occurs when it is excess of aggregate, when aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply. Sometimes it happens when aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. So when aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply, you find that is excess demand. So due to various reasons like increase in government expenditure, increase in investment, and increase in exports, increase in marginal propensity to save, you find the people tend to buy, they have more income, so they buy more, so consumption becomes more, the investment becomes more. So due to all this, then money supply is more in the economy. So due to all this, you find the demand becomes more. So in that case, you find excess demand. So what happens during that time? You find the inflation. So during the inflation time, you find there is a tendency to increase the price level. That is to correct the excess demand. So all this can be represented in a diagram. Then what happens during the deficient demand? We find like how many reasons contribute for increased excess demand. There are reasons contributing for deficient demand, which we have already discussed. So you find what all you have seen as increase for excess demand, here you find all decrease. For example, decrease in investment, decrease in government expenditure. Then you find decrease in marginal propensity to save. So because you find there is a rise in imports. So what happens when there is a rise in imports? You find the goods from other countries are coming in. Then they compare the prices. You find when the price is less than the domestically made products, you find naturally you go for that. So what happens? The demand goes down. So these are the reasons which we have already discussed for deficient demand. So during deficient demand, you find deflationary gap. So here during this time, you find the prices are brought down. And we have already seen that what measures are taken by the government to handle excess demand situation and the deficient demand situation. Let us see the diagram now. This first diagram you find x-axis represents income, output, employment. Y-axis represents aggregate demand. Due to increase in investment, you find there is an increase in demand. So at OEM employment, you find the aggregate demand curve and the aggregate supply curve intersect at point T. That is, the point T represents the full employment equilibrium where AD is equal to AS, and demand increases. So you find AD, the AD is equal to consumption plus investment. Now there is an increase in demand, so you find AD1, the new aggregate demand curve, which is consumption plus investment plus change in investment. So that you find at a point F they cut each other. So EF, it is a inflationary gap. So you find during excess demand, you find there is a inflation. You find there is no change in employment. That is why you find the price increases during this time. Now next, to control the situation, to bring it to the full employment equilibrium, the government takes those measures. Now you find this new aggregate demand curve lies above the AD. So when it lies above AD, you find inflation gap and it is excess demand. In the next one, you find deficient demand. You find AD, that is consumption plus investment, and OM, output, that is this position. You find they cut at point E, which is full employment equilibrium. Then due to decrease in investment, you find there's a new curve, that is aggregate demand curve AD1, which is consumption plus investment plus change in investment. So it cut at point G. So EG is deflationary gap. E is full employment equilibrium. So it remains, it is OM, O, this is M. So OM, the output remains the employment remains the same, because we have used the full employment, using the resources at the fullest level in both the situations.